Hey everybody, this is Dan and welcome to week 2 of History 3380. I hope you enjoyed your first week back at school at UT. This week, this module is our first run through at the core of the class, the subject matter. Last week we talked about how to get around and sort of the logistics of the class. This week we're going to dig into the content, and I have a kind of a stunning confession to make. As a history major and a history teacher, I often think, I don't know what good history does us. In other words, most of us take this as sort of an elective, and we think we're going to learn some dates or some stuff about famous dead white guys or whatever. And what good is it really to us? So I'm thinking about applied history. In other words, how can we take the history that we learn and apply it to our day-to-day lives? And if we do that, we'll get some good out of it, because let's face it, we spend a lot of time and money on tuition, and we want to walk away with some information we can use or that can help us out. So what I want to do to that end is say, okay, here's our situation today in American society. And here is the history that led us to where we're at today. And once we establish that link between the past and the present, then we can think about how we as individuals maybe can change some things we don't believe in. So the first thing we're going to do this week is we're going to learn about a Supreme Court case called Citizens United. And that's a modern case. And many of you already know about it, but Citizens United is controversial because it's where the Supreme Court decided that corporations and unions are the same as people when it comes to being able to give money to political interest or to politicians. So this idea that corporations can fund politicians and influence policy is upsetting to a lot of people. And we need to learn about that court case, because the power of corporations and the power of business in the U.S. is something that has occurred, all the way back to, I would argue, the 1600s, when the first Europeans came to North America. So we're going to learn about Citizens United first, and then also we're going to read an article from the Atlantic magazine, which addresses the idea of corporate or business power in the U.S. and political influence. And it's important because corporations, give money to politicians and influence the way they vote. And that can affect things like, how we pay for health care, insurance, interest rate on loans, student loan deductions, gun control, pharmaceuticals. Many of these things, policy is decided by corporate lobbyists. Now, you all probably know what a lobbyist is. A lobbyist is a person who is hired by a corporation or a special interest group or a union to influence policymaking. And interestingly, the term lobbyist, actually most people will say, American history majors will say, that it came about in the era of President Grant. So that's after the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant in the latter part of the 1800s, 1860s, that President Grant would go down to the lobby of the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. after work because he liked to smoke a cigar and maybe have a glass of whiskey, and that many people would be hanging out in the lobby of the hotel hoping to spend some time with him, to try to talk to him or try to get their position across and influence policy. It's a great story, but it's really not true, because if you go back into the archives, you see the word lobbyist come about in the 1830s, and really most historians that study this in any great detail, and it's one of those nerd things, most people believe that the term lobbyist came over from Parliament in England much earlier, but neither here nor there. We know what a lobbyist is. We know that they influence policy. So, I think we need to learn where lobbying started and how it affects us today. So that's why we're going to go with this Citizens United and this Atlantic article and read about that. Now, once we decide, how corporations have influence on society today, then we as individuals, we can take a position on it. So we can say, hey, I either don't have a problem with corporate influence, or I do have a problem with corporate influence. I either think that the influence of big money and big corporations and big capitalism is a negative, or I don't have any problem with the free market and people trying to get their point across or get their policies across in the political arena. And that's fine. We can talk about this idea that history is made up of varying viewpoints, and none of them are really wrong. They're just viewpoints. And it's the same as we discuss Citizens United and other parts of the narrative as far as influence of corporations go. You may be all for it, you may be against it. There's no right or wrong here, but we need to know where we're at and formulate an opinion on how we feel about these things, because as citizens, we can influence society in certain ways. Certainly we can do that by our vote, so we can research politicians and see who is someone who takes a lot of money from corporations. We can influence the way society is as parents or as leaders or as teachers or as workers in the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. And we can also influence business based on the choices we make in the marketplace, whether it's what cars we buy, what food we buy, that sort of thing, because the market is dynamic. And between voting, leadership, and your behavior in the marketplace, we really do have a say in how businesses run and what kind of influence they have, although it doesn't always seem like it because it's such a long-term process. But history can help us, because if we learn at what points in the past significant events occurred that led to the way things are today, then as people with influence, as people who are active in society, we can start to make choices that reflect how we feel about these things. So I won't go on and on. I think you know what I'm talking about, but that's really applied history. Let's learn what happened in the past, where we're at right now, and then do something about it through social action or through the way we vote or whatever. Lastly, in this module, you'll need to use that resources, it's over there, resources tab on the website menu, because there's some definitions in there you need to know. I want you to know what capitalism is. Most of you probably already know. I want you to know what socialism is, what communism is. Look at terms like free market and laissez-faire. They're all in there. Adam Smith, there's some other people in there. But I want you to familiarize yourself, especially with capitalism, socialism, communism. And that way, as you read about Citizens United and corporate influence, that's really how capitalism has sort of shaken out in our society today. So that's it for now. I'm going way too long. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. My phone number, 419-345-7220. My email is daniel.french@utoledo.edu. Have a great week at school. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.